Hello, my good friends. How are you today? May God bless you all. I will not introduce anything. You guys watch the video and feel it, then let's evaluate together. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Ava Thompson sat cross-legged on her worn-out IKEA couch in her Brooklyn apartment, staring at the screen as notifications piled up like a digital avalanche. Instagram, Twitter, even LinkedIn. Her name was everywhere, tangled up in a headline she never wanted to see. Billionaire Ethan Caldwell's mystery woman. Who is she? Below it, a grainy photo captured a moment she'd thought was theirs alone. Ethan's hand resting over hers on a checkered tablecloth, her head tilted back in laughter, the dim glow of an Italian restaurant in Jersey casting soft shadows across their faces. She scrolled, her thumb trembling. The comments were a gut punch. "Gold digger alert," one read. "Does she think she's going to be the next Mrs. Caldwell? LOL, another sneered. And then the ones that stung deeper, the ones that didn't even bother to hide their venom. He could do better than that. Ava's chest tightened. She knew what that meant. She'd spent her whole life dodging the assumptions tied to her brown skin, her curly hair, her roots in a Detroit neighborhood where dreams were more likely to rust than shine. But seeing it laid bare, typed out by strangers who didn't even know her name, felt like a betrayal of something she couldn't quite name. Her apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of traffic filtering through the window. It was a small space, barely 600 square feet, but she'd made it her own. A second-hand bookshelf sagged under the weight of novels and advertising textbooks, their spines creased from late-night study sessions. A sketchpad lay open on the coffee table, half-finished ideas for her next campaign scrawled in pencil. A string of fairy lights draped across the exposed brick wall cast a warm glow, but tonight it felt more like a spotlight she couldn't escape. New York City pulsed outside, horns blaring, subway trains rattling, but inside, Ava was frozen, caught in the eye of a storm she hadn't seen coming. She closed her eyes, trying to rewind to that night in Jersey. It was 2 weeks ago, a Thursday. She and Ethan had driven out to this hole-in-the-wall place called Mama Rosa's, the kind of spot where the meatballs were homemade and the waiters didn't care who you were. They'd sat in a corner booth, sharing a bottle of cheap Chianti, talking about everything and nothing, his obsession with Miles Davis, her disastrous attempt to bake cornbread for her mom's birthday last year. He'd reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, and for a moment, the world had shrunk to just the two of them. No boardrooms, no paparazzi, no weight of his last name or her hustle. Just Ava and Ethan, laughing like they were any other couple stealing a night away from the chaos. How naive she'd been. Someone had been watching. Someone with a phone camera and a knack for turning private moments into public property. Now that photo was everywhere. And with it, her carefully built life was unraveling. Ava's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Maya Jackson, her best friend and the only person at Zenith Agency she trusted completely. "Girl, you okay? Call me. Now!" Ava sighed, her finger hovering over the screen. She wanted to call, wanted to spill everything, her fear, her anger, the way her heart still flipped at the thought of Ethan despite it all. But what could she say? That she'd fallen for a man whose world was never meant to include her? That she'd thought she could keep it secret, only to have it explode in her face? Instead, she opened her email, hoping for a distraction. Big mistake. The first message was from Howard Grant, her boss at Zenith. The subject line was curt. Urgent. Meeting tomorrow. Her stomach dropped as she skimmed the body. "Ava, we've received concerns from several clients regarding recent media attention. We need to discuss potential conflicts of interest. 9 a.m. sharp." Conflicts of interest. The phrase felt like a slap. She'd spent 10 years clawing her way up in advertising, turning coffee runs and late nights into a corner office with a view of Manhattan. She'd pitched campaigns to CEOs, celebrities, even a senator once, always proving she belonged. And now, because of one photo, it was all at risk. She tossed the phone onto the couch and ran her hands through her curls, tugging just hard enough to feel the sting. How had it come to this? 6 months ago, she was just Ava Thompson, executive creative director, the woman who could sell luxury watches to people who already owned Rolexes. She'd built her reputation campaign by campaign. No shortcuts, no silver spoons. Born in Detroit, raised in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered more than they shone, she'd learned early that ambition was her ticket out. College on a scholarship, grad school loans she was still paying off, a portfolio that spoke louder than any last name ever could. She'd made it to New York, to the top of her game, and she'd done it on her terms. And then Ethan Caldwell walked into her life. She could still picture that first meeting, clear as day. It was a Tuesday morning in April, and she was pitching to Caldwell Enterprises, Ethan's company, for a chance to handle their new line of luxury watches. She'd spent weeks preparing, rehearsing every slide until she could recite it in her sleep. Her team was nervous. Landing Caldwell would put Zenith on the map. But Ava thrived under pressure. She'd walked into that boardroom in Midtown, her navy blazer crisp, her curls pulled into a sleek bun, ready to own the room. What she hadn't expected was Ethan himself. CEOs like him didn't show up to pitches. They sent their marketing VPs or some assistant with a clipboard. But there he was, sitting at the far end of the polished mahogany table, his dark hair slightly tousled, his suit probably worth more than her rent. He was focused on his phone when she started, barely glancing up, and for a split second, she'd felt a flicker of irritation. Fine, she'd thought. I'll make you look. She launched into her presentation, her voice steady, her slides sharp. Halfway through, she noticed his phone was down, his eyes locked on her. Not just listening, seeing her. When she outlined the campaign's tagline, "Time Worth Keeping," his lips twitched into a half smile, and he leaned forward, elbows on the table. By the time she finished, he was asking questions, the kind that cut straight to the core of her strategy. No fluff, no posturing, just a mind as sharp as hers. "You've got something here," he'd said when she wrapped up, his voice low but deliberate. "The concept's bold. I like bold." Coming from Ethan Caldwell, it felt like a Grammy. She'd smiled, professional but warm, and thanked him. But as she gathered her notes, she felt his gaze linger, and something in the air shifted, like the first note of a song you know you'll never forget. That was the start. Late-night emails about campaign tweaks turned into phone calls that lasted past midnight. Meetings stretched into dinners, always somewhere discreet. A dive bar in Brooklyn, a cafe in Hoboken, places where no one would recognize the Ethan Caldwell from Forbes covers. He wasn't what she'd expected. The man who commanded boardrooms with a single look would laugh at her stories about spilling coffee on her first creative director or hum along to Ella Fitzgerald records in his car. He listened like her words were the only thing that mattered, and when he looked at her, she felt like the only person in the world. But he was still Ethan Caldwell. His name was on buildings, his face in magazines. He moved in a world of old money and polished smiles, where people like Ava, people who grew up with second-hand sneakers and dreams too big for their zip code, were outsiders. She'd known from the start that loving him was a risk. She just hadn't realized how much it could cost. Her phone lit up again, this time with Ethan's name. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the answer button. Part of her wanted to hear his voice, to know he was as shaken as she was. But another part, the part that had fought too hard to let anyone make her feel small, dreaded what he might say. Was she about to become a private matter his PR team would spin away? Or worse, a mistake he'd distanced himself from. She answered anyway. "Ethan," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Ava." He sounded tense, not the warm, teasing Ethan she knew. "Are you okay? Am I okay?" She let out a bitter laugh, pacing to the window. Outside, Brooklyn flickered with life. Pizza joints, bodegas, kids laughing on stoops despite the late hour. My inbox is a war zone. My boss wants my head, and the internet thinks I'm some kind of... I don't even know what. So no, Ethan, I'm not okay. "I'm handling it," he said, his tone clipped like he was in CEO mode. "My team's drafting a statement. Just lay low for now." "A statement saying what?" she snapped, her grip tightening on the phone. "That I'm a friend? A colleague? Or are you just going to pretend this never happened?" There was a pause, long enough to make her heart sink. "It's not that simple," he said finally. "You know that. I have shareholders, investors, and I have a life I built from nothing," she cut in. "I don't get to hide behind a PR team, Ethan. This is my name out there, my face." "I know." His voice softened, but it didn't ease the knot in her chest. "I'm trying to protect you. Both of us. Just give me time." "Time," she echoed, staring at the city lights. Funny how that's the one thing we never had enough of. She hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking. She didn't want promises or excuses. She wanted the Ethan who'd sat across from her at Mama Rosa's, who'd looked at her like she was the only thing that made sense in his world. But that Ethan felt a million miles away now. Another text came through, this time from Maya again. "I'm coming over. Don't argue." Ava almost smiled despite herself. Maya was a force, 5 feet of sarcasm and loyalty wrapped in a leather jacket. They'd met 5 years ago at Zenith, bonding over bad office coffee and a shared hatred of Derek Walsh, the agency's resident snake. Maya was a designer, brilliant but unfiltered, and she'd been Ava's rock through every late night and lost client. When Maya knocked 20 minutes later, Ava opened the door to find her holding a bottle of tequila and a bag of bodega tacos. "Emergency kit," Maya said, pushing past her. She plopped onto the couch, her braids swinging as she kicked off her sneakers. "All right, spill. What's the damage?" Ava sank beside her, grabbing a taco just to have something to do with her hands. "It's bad, Maya. My phone's blowing up. Howard's calling me in tomorrow, and Ethan's acting like this is just another deal he can close." Maya raised an eyebrow, pouring tequila into 2 mismatched mugs. "Uh-huh. And what's the internet saying?" Ava groaned, handing over her phone. Maya scrolled, her expression darkening with each swipe. "Wow, these people need hobbies. Trying to snag a billionaire, please. If anything, he's the one chasing you." "Doesn't feel like it right now," Ava admitted, staring at the fairy lights. "He's in damage control mode. I don't even know if I'm part of the plan or just collateral." Maya handed her a mug, her eyes softening. "Listen, Ava. You didn't get to where you are by letting people define you. Not your old bosses, not those snobs at client dinners, and definitely not a bunch of keyboard warriors. You're Ava freaking Thompson. You built campaigns that sell dreams. Don't let this mess make you forget that." Ava took a sip, the tequila burning her throat. "I thought I could keep it under wraps, you know? Just me and him, no one else. But now it's like the whole world's watching, judging me for something I thought was mine." "You don't owe them an explanation," Maya said firmly. "But if Ethan's not stepping up, you need to decide what you want. Because you're not some side character in his story, girl. You're the whole damn book." Ava nodded, her throat tight. Maya was right. She'd fought too hard to let this break her. But as she glanced at her phone, still silent since Ethan's call, She couldn't shake the fear that she was fighting for something that might already be lost. She stood, crossing to the window, the city sprawling below like a sea of possibilities and traps. New York had always been her proving ground, the place where she'd turned grit into gold. But tonight, it felt like a stage, and she was playing a role she hadn't auditioned for. Tomorrow, she'd face Howard, the clients, maybe even Ethan. She didn't know what would happen, but she knew one thing. She wasn't going down without a fight. Her laptop pinged with a new message, and her heart skipped when she saw Ethan's name. "Meet me tonight, 10 p.m., the usual place. We need to talk." The usual place. A rooftop bar in Dumbo, tucked away from prying eyes. She stared at the words, torn between hope and dread. Was this his chance to fix things, or the moment he'd let her go? Ava turned back to the mirror by her door, catching her reflection. Her eyes were tired, but there was steel in them, the same fire that had carried her from Detroit to this city of dreams. Whatever came next, she'd face it head on. Because if there was one thing Ava Thompson knew, it was how to survive a storm. Hey, if you've ever felt like the world's trying to tear down something you hold dear, stick with Ava's story. It's about love, courage, and standing tall when the odds are stacked against you. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. What do you think Ava should do next? Should she meet Ethan or walk away while she still can? Let's find out together. 6 months ago, Ava Thompson walked into the boardroom of Caldwell Enterprises like she owned it. The Midtown skyscraper was all glass and steel, the kind of place that screamed money before you even stepped off the elevator. She adjusted her navy blazer, smoothed the stray curl, and took a deep breath. This was it, the pitch that could change everything. Her team at Zenith Agency had spent weeks crafting a campaign for Caldwell's new line of luxury watches, and Ava had poured her soul into every slide, every tagline. Landing this account wouldn't just boost her career, it would cement her as one of the best in the game. The boardroom was a study in power, a long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan's skyline, and a dozen suits staring her down. She'd pitched to tough crowds before, CEOs, celebrities, even a politician who'd interrupted her every 5 seconds, but this felt different. Maybe it was the stakes. Maybe it was the fact that Caldwell Enterprises wasn't just any client. They were the gold standard, the kind of name that opened doors or slammed them shut. Ava set up her laptop, her team hovering nervously behind her. She glanced at the empty chair at the head of the table, expecting some marketing VP to stroll in with a Starbucks cup and a clipboard. Instead, the door swung open, and in walked Ethan Caldwell himself. She froze for half a second, her practiced smile faltering. Ethan Caldwell wasn't supposed to be here. CEOs like him didn't sit in on pitches. They had people for that. But there he was, 6 feet of tailored confidence, his dark hair slightly mussed like he'd run a hand through it one too many times. His suit, charcoal, probably custom, fit him like it was made to show off the way he moved. He nodded to the room, his expression neutral, and settled into the chair, pulling out his phone without a word. Ava's irritation flared. Great, she thought. Billionaire's too busy scrolling Twitter to care about my work. She squared her shoulders, determined to make him pay attention. If Ethan Caldwell thought he could ignore her, he was about to get schooled. Good morning, she began, her voice clear and commanding. I'm Ava Thompson, Executive Creative Director at Zenith Agency. Today, we're here to show you how we'll make Caldwell's new watch line not just a product, but a story people can't stop telling. She clicked to her first slide, diving into the campaign's core. Time worth keeping. It was bold, emotional, rooted in the idea that luxury wasn't about flash. It was about moments that mattered. She walked them through the visuals, sleek ads featuring real people, not models, wearing the watches in quiet, meaningful scenes. A father teaching his kid to ride a bike. A woman staring at the stars on a rooftop. Every image was paired with her words, sharp and evocative, designed to hit the heart and the wallet. Halfway through, she stole a glance at Ethan. His phone was down now, his eyes locked on her. Not just listening, watching, like he was trying to figure her out. It threw her for a moment, but she pushed through, leaning into her passion for the work. By the time she wrapped up, outlining a social media strategy that would dominate Instagram and TikTok, the room was hers. Even the suits who'd started out skeptical were nodding, scribbling notes. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Your tagline," he said, his voice low, deliberate. "Time worth keeping. It's strong. But what's the pivot for the holiday push? You're banking a lot on emotion. How do you keep it from feeling soft?" The question was a curveball, but Ava was ready. "Emotion's only soft if it's hollow," she said, meeting his gaze. "We're not selling tears. We're selling connection. For the holidays, we'll shift the visuals to family, legacy, moments that anchor people through the chaos. Same tagline, but with a warmer palette and a tie-in to your foundation's charity work. It's authentic, and authenticity sells." He held her eyes for a beat too long, his lips twitching into a half-smile. "Authentic," he repeated, like he was testing the word. "All right, Miss Thompson, I'm intrigued." Intrigued was an understatement. After the pitch, while her team packed up, Ethan approached her. "Can you stay a minute?" he asked, his tone casual but his eyes anything but. "I'd like to dig into your social strategy." Her team exchanged glances, but Ava nodded, ignoring the flutter in her stomach. "Sure," she said, keeping it professional. They sat at the now empty table, Manhattan glittering beyond the windows like a promise. What started as a discussion about hashtags and influencers stretched into something else entirely. He asked about her process, how she'd come up with the campaign's vibe. She found herself telling him about a late-night brainstorming session, fueled by pizza and Red Bull, when the tagline hit her like a lightning bolt. "You don't strike me as someone who waits for inspiration," he said, leaning back in his chair, his tie loosened just enough to make him look human. "I don't," she shot back, grinning. "Inspiration's overrated. It's just hard work dressed up in fairy dust." He laughed, a real laugh, not the polished chuckle she'd expected from a guy like him. "Fair enough. So what keeps you going? Long nights, picky clients? Why do you do it?" She hesitated, caught off guard. "Because I love it," she said finally. "Turning an idea into something people feel, something they remember. That's my high. Plus I'm stubborn. Someone tells me I can't do something, I'm gonna prove them wrong." His smile faded into something softer, more curious. "I get that," he said quietly. "More than you'd think." They talked for 3 hours, until the cleaning crew started vacuuming outside. It wasn't just work anymore. They swapped stories about music. He was a jazz nerd, she leaned more toward Motown. Bad first jobs. He'd washed dishes at a diner, she'd waited tables through college. Even their worst New York moments. Her, getting stuck in a subway car with a broken AC. Him, a pigeon stealing his bagel mid-bite. When they finally parted ways, the air felt charged, like they'd crossed an invisible line without meaning to. That should have been the end of it. A great pitch, a big win for Zenith, maybe a polite follow-up email. But 2 days later, Ethan called her cell, her personal number, not her office line. "I've been thinking about your campaign," he said, his voice warm through the static. "Got a few ideas. Can we grab coffee, somewhere low-key?" Ava's gut screamed danger, but her curiosity was louder. "Sure," she said, ignoring the warning bells. "Name the place." He picked a spot in Harlem, a jazz club called Blue Note Lounge, tucked down a side street where tourists never wandered. She showed up in jeans and a leather jacket, her curls loose for once, expecting a quick chat over espresso. Instead, Ethan was already there, alone at a corner table. No entourage, no laptop, just a glass of bourbon and a smile that made her breath catch. He was in a simple button-down, sleeves rolled up, looking nothing like the guy whose name was plastered on skyscrapers. "Of all the jazz joints in all the city," he said, standing as she approached, his eyes crinkling with amusement. She laughed, sliding into the seat across from him. "Quoting Casablanca now? I pegged you for more of a Wall Street Journal guy." "Ouch," he said, clutching his chest like she'd wounded him. "I'll have you know I've got layers, Ava Thompson. Stick around. You might be surprised." And she did stick around, way longer than she'd planned. The club was dim, the air thick with the smell of whiskey and old wood. A saxophonist wailed on stage, notes curling around them like smoke. They talked through 2 sets, then 3, the conversation flowing as easily as the music. He told her about sneaking into jazz clubs as a broke college kid, back when his dad was still grooming him to take over the family empire. She opened up about Detroit, about the summer her mom taught her to dance to Aretha Franklin in their tiny kitchen. "You ever miss it?" he asked, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "Home, I mean." "Sometimes," she admitted, stirring her drink. "Not the place, but the feeling. Like you belong, no questions asked. New York's not exactly forgiving." He nodded, his gaze steady. "I wouldn't know. Belonging's never been my thing. Too many expectations." She tilted her head, studying him. "You? The guy with the penthouse and the private jet? Come on." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'd be surprised how heavy all that gets." There it was, a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the man behind the headlines. Ava felt something shift, like the ground wasn't as solid as it had been. She leaned forward, her elbow brushing his on the table, and the air between them thickened. His eyes dropped to her lips for a split second, and her pulse kicked up, loud enough to drown out the music. She could have sworn he felt it too. The pull, the heat, the thing neither of them was supposed to name. "Careful," she said, her voice lighter than she felt. "You keep looking at me like that. I might think you're not here for the campaign." He grinned, slow and dangerous. "Maybe I'm not." Her breath caught, and for a moment, she forgot they were in a crowded club, forgot he was Ethan Caldwell, forgot she'd spent her life building walls to keep guys like him out. His hand shifted on the table, close enough that his knuckles grazed hers, and the contact sent a jolt through her, warm and electric. She didn't pull away, and neither did he. The saxophonist hit a high note, snapping her back to reality. She leaned back, breaking the spell, her heart pounding. "We should probably call it," she said, forcing a smile. "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah," he said, but his voice was rough, like he was wrestling with something. "Probably." They stepped outside, the April air cool against her skin. Harlem buzzed around them, food trucks, laughter, the clink of bottles from a nearby bar. Ethan walked her to her Uber, his hands stuffed in his pockets like he was trying to keep them in check. "This was unexpected," he said, glancing at her. "In a good way." "Good's dangerous," she teased, but her stomach flipped as she said it. "Tell me about it," he murmured, holding her gaze until the car pulled up. She slid into the back seat, her mind racing as the driver peeled away. Through the rear view, she saw Ethan standing there, watching her go, his silhouette sharp against the neon glow of the club. She pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the ghost of that almost moment, and wondered what the hell she was getting herself into. Back in her apartment, Ava kicked off her boots and flopped onto her bed, the fairy lights casting shadows across the ceiling. Her phone sat silent. No texts, no emails, just the memory of Ethan's voice, his touch, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. She knew she should shut it down, keep it professional. He was a client, a billionaire, a walking complication. But as she closed her eyes, all she could think was that for the first time in years, she felt alive, really alive, and that scared her more than anything. Ava Thompson was falling, and she knew it. 3 months after that night at the Blue Note Lounge, she and Ethan Caldwell had carved out a secret world, a bubble where the rules of New York's upper crust and her own hard-won career didn't apply. It was dinners in tucked-away restaurants across the Hudson, late-night drives along the West Side Highway with the windows down, and stolen moments that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. But every time she caught herself smiling too long at his texts, a voice in her head whispered, "This can't last." They were careful, obsessively so. No selfies, no check-ins, no paper trail. Ethan picked places where his face wouldn't draw stares. A taco stand in Red Hook, an art gallery in Hoboken, a jazz bar in the Bronx where the bartender called him Buddy instead of Mr. Caldwell. Ava played her part, keeping her work phone free of their messages, dodging Maya's knowing looks at the office. But the secrecy, thrilling at first, was starting to feel like a weight, a reminder that what they had wasn't meant for daylight. Tonight, they were in Greenwich Village, holed up in a loft Ethan kept as a hideout from his penthouse life. It was nothing like the glossy spreads she'd seen in magazines about him. No marble counters or crystal chandeliers, just exposed brick, a sagging couch, and a vintage turntable spinning Coltrane. Ava loved it here, the way it stripped Ethan down to someone she could almost believe was hers. He was sprawled on the floor, shirt untucked, pouring them wine from a bottle with a chipped label. "You're telling me you've never tried to cook?" she teased, sitting cross-legged beside him, her jeans frayed at the knees. "Not even like scrambled eggs?" He grinned, handing her a glass. "Why cook when you've got takeout on speed dial? Besides, I'm a disaster in the kitchen. Last time I tried, I set off the smoke alarm." She laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet loft. "Okay, that's tragic. Next time I'm teaching you how to make my mom's cornbread. No excuses." "Deal," he said, his eyes crinkling. "But only if you promise not to judge my technique." "No promises," she shot back, sipping her wine. It was cheap, tangy, nothing like the vintages he probably served at board dinners. But it tasted better here, with him. She leaned closer, her shoulder brushing his, and felt that familiar spark, the one that made her forget the world outside. They talked for hours, the conversation weaving through their lives like the jazz on the turntable. She told him about growing up in Detroit, how her mom would blast Motown records on Saturday mornings, dancing with a broom like it was a partner. He opened up about his dad, a man who'd built Caldwell Enterprises from nothing but expected Ethan to carry it without question. He didn't believe in dreams, Ethan said, his voice soft. Just results. Ava tilted her head, studying him. "And you? What's your dream?" He looked at her, his gaze steady, unguarded. "Right now? This." Her breath caught, and before she could think, he leaned in, his lips brushing hers. The kiss was slow at first, tentative, like they were both testing the edge of something dangerous. But then her hands found his shoulders, his fingers slid into her curls, and the world tilted. The wineglass tipped over, forgotten, as she pulled him closer, the heat of him grounding her in a way nothing else could. His mouth moved to her jaw, her neck, and she felt her pulse race, every nerve alive with wanting him. But then she froze, a jolt of reality cutting through the haze. She pulled back, her hand still on his chest, feeling his heartbeat under her palms. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice shaky. "We can't. I can't just be—" "I know," he cut in, his forehead resting against hers, his breath uneven. "You're not a secret, Ava. Not to me." "Then what am I?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, raw and unguarded. Because this hiding, sneaking around, it's starting to feel like I'm something you're ashamed of. His eyes widened, and he cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. Ashamed? Ava, you're the only real thing in my life. The rest of it, boardrooms, galas, all that noise, it's just a show. But this? He gestured between them, his voice fierce. This is mine. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it hurt. But the weight of their worlds, his tied to old money, hers built on grit and hustle, pressed against her chest. Then why does it feel like we're breaking rules? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer right away, and the silence was answer enough. They sat there, caught in the space between what they wanted and what they could have, until he kissed her again, softer this time, like an apology. We'll figure it out, he murmured. I promise. But promises were thin armor against what came next. The Caldwell Foundation Gala was a glimpse into Ethan's real world, and Ava wasn't ready for it. She'd been to fancy events before, agency awards, client dinners, but nothing like this. The venue was a grand ballroom in the Plaza Hotel, all chandeliers and gold trim, the air heavy with perfume and ambition. Women in sequined gowns sipped champagne, their jewelry catching the light like tiny stars. Men in tuxedos traded handshakes and whispers, their smiles sharp as knives. Ava felt their eyes on her the moment she walked in, her burgundy dress hugging her curves, elegant, but not enough to blend into their polished uniformity. She was here representing Zenith, a professional guest, nothing more. That was the plan. Keep it cordial, keep it distant, keep Ethan at arm's length in public. They'd rehearsed it, down to the polite nods they'd exchange if their paths crossed. But standing alone by the bar, clutching a glass of Prosecco, Ava felt like an actor who'd forgotten her lines. Ethan was across the room, surrounded by a cluster of donors, his laugh polished, his posture perfect. He looked every inch the billionaire heir, untouchable in his tailored tux. She tried not to stare, but her eyes kept finding him, like he was the only thing grounding her in this sea of strangers. "Enjoying the circus?" a voice asked, and Ava turned to see Maya, who'd snuck in as her +1. Maya was a vision in an emerald jumpsuit, her braids swept into a high bun, but her smirk said she was as out of place as Ava felt. "Barely," Ava muttered, sipping her drink. "I keep waiting for someone to ask me if I'm with the catering staff." Maya snorted. "Let 'em try. You'd eat them alive." She glanced at Ethan, then back at Ava, her eyes narrowing. "You're playing with fire, you know. That man's got complication written all over him." "I know," Ava said, her voice low, "but it's not like I planned this." "Nobody plans a train wreck," Maya shot back, but her tone softened. "Just be careful, okay? You've worked too hard to let some rich guy derail you." Before Ava could respond, a woman approached, her silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, her navy gown screaming old money. Lillian Caldwell, Ethan's mother. Ava's stomach twisted as Lillian's sharp blue eyes landed on her, appraising her like she was a painting at auction. "You're with Zenith, aren't you?" Lillian said, her smile polite but cold. "The agency handling our watch campaign." "Yes, ma'am," Ava said, matching her tone. "Ava Thompson, creative director." Lillian's smile didn't waver, but her eyes flicked over Ava, taking in every detail, her dress, her posture, the way she held her glass. "How charming," she said. "It's so refreshing to see new faces in the industry, though I imagine it must be challenging, coming from a different background." Ava's grip tightened on her flute. She knew a dig when she heard one, but she kept her face neutral. "Challenges are what make it fun," she said smoothly. "Nothing worth having comes easy." Lillian's laugh was light, practiced. "Well said. Oh, have you met Claire Montgomery?" She gestured to a woman approaching, blonde and willowy, her cream dress flowing like she'd stepped out of a Vogue shoot. "Claire's practically family. She and Ethan grew up together." Claire smiled, extending a manicured hand. "A pleasure," she said, her voice warm, but her eyes cool, like she was sizing Ava up. "Ethan's told me so much about your campaign. He's quite impressed." Ava shook her hand, forcing a smile. "Glad to hear it. We're excited to work with him." Lillian's gaze lingered, and Ava felt the weight of her unspoken message. "You don't belong here." Then Lillian turned to Ethan, who'd just joined them, her hand resting on his arm with possessive ease. "Darling, Claire was just saying how much she missed you in the Hamptons this summer. You really must visit her family's estate soon." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Sure, Mom." His eyes flicked to Ava, a silent apology. But he didn't pull away from Lillian's grip. Ava's chest burned, but she excused herself, weaving through the crowd to the balcony for air. The city sparkled below, a maze of lights and noise, but it couldn't drown out the doubts creeping in. Ethan wasn't hers. Not really. He belonged to this world, to women like Claire, to expectations she'd never fit. Back at Zenith, the cracks widened. Derek Walsh, the agency's resident opportunist, had been sniffing around Ava's projects for weeks, his smarmy grin hiding a knife. He cornered her in the break room one morning, leaning against the coffee machine like he owned it. "Heard you were the star of the Caldwell Gala," he said, his tone dripping with fake cheer. "Hobnobbing with the big dogs, huh?" "Just doing my job," Ava said, pouring her coffee, her back to him. "Right," he drawled. "Funny how you're always working with Caldwell himself. Must be nice, getting that kind of attention." She spun around, her eyes narrowing. "Say what you mean, Derek." He shrugged, smirking. "Nothing. Just wondering how you landed such a high-profile client. Talent, I'm sure." Ava's blood boiled, but she held her tongue. Derek was fishing, and she wasn't about to give him bait. But his words lingered, a reminder that even her own colleagues were watching, waiting for her to slip. That night, she met Ethan in his car, parked on a quiet street in Dumbo. The skyline glittered across the river, but the mood inside was heavy. "Your mom's not exactly my biggest fan," Ava said, staring out the window. Ethan sighed, rubbing his neck. "She's protective. Always has been." "Protective?" Ava turned to him, her voice sharp. "She looked at me like I was a problem to solve. And Claire, what's her deal? Your mom's practically planning your wedding." "It's not like that," he said, his hand reaching for hers. "Claire's just a friend. My mom's got her own ideas, but they're not mine." "Then what are yours?" she pressed, pulling her hand back. "Because I'm out here risking everything. My job, my reputation, and you're still playing the perfect son in public." His eyes darkened, frustration flickering. "You think this is easy for me? I've got a board breathing down my neck, investors who'd lose it if they knew." "Knew what?" she cut in. "That you're with me? Is that the part you're afraid of?" "No," he said, his voice low, fierce. "I'm afraid of what they'd do to you. The press, my family. They'd tear you apart." She laughed, bitter. "They're already doing that, Ethan, and you're not exactly stopping them." He reached for her again, but she opened the car door, stepping into the rain. "Figure out what you want," she said, her voice breaking. "Because I can't keep pretending this is enough." She walked away, the city swallowing her steps, her heart pounding with a truth she couldn't outrun. Love wasn't supposed to feel like a cage. But the real blow came 2 days later. Her phone buzzed during a meeting, a text from an unknown number. "Hey Ava, it's Nadia Patel. Remember me from NYU? Heard you're cozy with Ethan Caldwell. Care to chat for a story?" Nadia, the journalism major who'd once borrowed Ava's notes, now a tabloid shark sniffing blood. Ava's hands went cold. Someone was talking, and if Nadia had her number, the secret was already half out. She deleted the text, but the dread stayed, coiling in her gut. She glanced at Ethan's name in her phone, wondering if he'd call tonight, wondering if she'd answer. The city lights outside her office window flickered, beautiful and unforgiving, and Ava knew one thing for sure. Their bubble was bursting, and she wasn't sure either of them could catch the pieces. Ava Thompson's world was crumbling, and it started with a single photo. She'd known the risk of loving Ethan Caldwell, known their secret couldn't stay buried forever, but nothing had prepared her for the moment it all went public. That grainy snapshot from Mama Rosa's, her laughing, his hand on hers, had ignited a firestorm. And now, a week after it hit the internet, Ava was drowning in the fallout. Her Brooklyn apartment, once a sanctuary, felt like a bunker under siege. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, laptop open, the screen glowing with notifications she couldn't bring herself to open. Twitter was a battlefield. Caldwell's new fling, career move or love? One post sneered. "She's punching way above her weight," another jabbed, the words slicing deeper than Ava wanted to admit. The tabloids were worse, splashing her name across headlines with phrases like mystery woman and ambitious outsider. And then there were the emails, clients demanding meetings, colleagues whispering in threads she wasn't copied on, and one particularly brutal message from a rival agency. "Heard you're making waves, Ava. Hope you can swim." She slammed the laptop shut, her hands shaking. New York hummed outside her window, delivery trucks rumbling, kids shouting in the street, but it felt distant, like a movie she wasn't part of. Her fairy lights cast a soft glow across the room, catching the edge of a framed photo on her shelf. Her and her mom at her college graduation, both grinning like they'd conquered the world. That Ava felt a million miles away now, replaced by someone who didn't recognize her own life. The worst part wasn't the noise online, it was the silence from Ethan. Since their fight in his car, he'd gone quiet, his texts short and vague. "In meetings. We'll call soon." Each one felt like a brick in a wall growing between them, and Ava couldn't shake the fear that she was on the wrong side of it. She'd poured everything into their secret, her trust, her heart, her future. And now she was left wondering if it had all been a mistake. Her phone buzzed, jolting her. It was Maya Jackson, her best friend and lifeline at Zenith Agency. "I'm outside. Let me in before I freeze my ass off." Ava managed a weak smile, buzzing her up. 2 minutes later, Maya burst in, a whirlwind of braids and leather, carrying a paper bag that smelled like fried dumplings. "All right, Thompson," Maya said, kicking off her boots and dropping onto the couch. "You look like you've been hit by a truck. Spill." Ava sank beside her, grabbing a dumpling just to have something to hold. "It's a mess, Maya. The photos everywhere. Howard's pissed, and Ethan's. I don't even know what he's doing." Maya raised an eyebrow, unpacking the food. "Start with Howard. What did the old man say?" Ava sighed. The memory bit her. That morning, she'd walked into Howard Grant's office at Zenith, her stomach in knots. His corner suite was all glass and ego, awards lining the walls like trophies from a life she'd never touch. He hadn't even looked up from his desk when she sat down, just slid a printout of the photo across to her. Clients are concerned, Ava, he'd said, his voice clipped. This situation suggests a conflict of interest. We've built our reputation on trust, and right now, you're raising questions. My personal life has nothing to do with my work. She'd shot back, her cheeks hot. I've delivered on every campaign, Howard. You know that. He'd leaned back, steepling his fingers. Perception is reality in this business. 3 of our biggest accounts called today, worried about distractions. I'm not saying you're out, but we need to manage this. I'm recommending a leave of absence until it blows over. The words had hit like a punch. A leave of absence wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. 10 years of grinding, of proving herself in rooms where no one looked like her, and now she was one headline away from losing it all. She recounted it to Maya, her voice cracking. He didn't even ask my side, just assumed I'm the problem. Maya handed her a soda, her eyes blazing. Howard's a coward, always has been, worried about his precious clients more than his people. She leaned forward, her voice softening. But you're tougher than this, Ava. You didn't get to creative director by folding. So what's the plan? I don't know, Ava admitted, staring at the can in her hands. Part of me wants to fight, to walk into that office tomorrow and dare them to fire me. But then there's Ethan, and I don't know if he's worth it. Maya's face softened, but her words were blunt. Look, I get it. He's got those eyes, that smile, the whole billionaire package. But love's not supposed to make you feel small, Ava. If he's not showing up for you now, what's the point? Ava's throat tightened. She wanted to defend him, to say he was trying, but the truth was, she wasn't sure anymore. She thought of their last real moment together 2 weeks ago, before the photo leaked. They'd been at his Greenwich Village loft, sprawled on the floor, laughing over a story about her first pitch, a disaster where she'd tripped over a projector cord. His hand had brushed hers, and the air had shifted the way it always did with him. She'd let herself believe they could keep going like that, stealing pieces of each other in the dark. Now, those pieces felt like shards. Her phone pinged again, this time with an email from none other than Nadia Patel, the journalist who'd texted her days ago. Ava's heart sank as she opened it. Ava, I'm working on a follow-up about you and Ethan Caldwell. Sources say you've been meeting in secret for months. Happy to get your side. Deadline's tomorrow. Sources. The word sent a chill down her spine. Someone was talking, and Ava had a sinking feeling she knew who. Derek, she muttered, tossing the phone onto the couch. Derek Walsh, her colleague with a smile like a snake, had been circling her projects for months, dropping hints about her special connection to Ethan. She'd brushed it off as jealousy, but now it felt like a trap. If Derek was feeding Nadia dirt, he wasn't just after her clients. He was aiming for her job. Maya's eyes narrowed. That weasel? You think he's the leak? Who else? Ava said, pacing now. He's been gunning for me since I got promoted. Probably saw that photo as his golden ticket. Then call him out, Maya said, popping a dumpling in her mouth. Drag his ass to HR, make him squirm. No proof, Ava said, shaking her head. And even if I had it, Howard's already got 1 foot out the door with me. I can't afford to look paranoid. Maya leaned back, studying her. Okay, so Derek's a problem. Nadia's a problem. But what about Ethan? You can't keep dodging him, Ava. Either he's in this with you, or he's not. Ava didn't answer, her gaze drifting to the window. Brooklyn was alive outside, neon signs, street vendors, the hum of a city that never slept. She'd come here to build something, to prove she could make it on her terms. But loving Ethan was rewriting her story, and she wasn't sure she liked the new chapters. That night, Ethan texted, "Meet me at the hideout. 9 p.m., please. The Hideout was their spot. A rooftop bar in Dumbo with mismatched chairs and string lights, far from the paparazzi's reach. Ava hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. Part of her wanted to ignore him, to protect what was left of her heart. But another part, the part that still felt his hand on hers, his voice in her ear, needed answers. She showed up in jeans and a sweater, her curls loose, her guard up. The bar was quiet, just a few regulars nursing beers while a guitarist strummed in the corner. Ethan was at their usual table, tucked against the railing, the Manhattan skyline glittering behind him like a postcard. He looked tired, his shirt wrinkled, his jaw shadowed with stubble. For a moment, she saw the man she'd fallen for, not the billionaire dodging headlines. "Ava," he said, standing as she approached, his voice raw. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Neither was I," she said, sliding into the chair across from him. "But here we are." He sat, his hands clasped on the table, like he was trying to keep them still. "I'm sorry," he started, "for going quiet, for letting this mess get to you. I've been putting out fires, board meetings, investors, my mom, but I should have been there for you." Her chest tightened, a mix of relief and frustration. "You think? Ethan, my job's on the line. My name's being dragged through the mud and you're, what, drafting statements? Handling it?" "I'm trying," he said, his voice low, urgent. "You don't know what it's like, Ava. One wrong move, and the whole company takes a hit. Thousands of people depend on me. Employees, shareholders. And what about me?" She cut in, her voice sharper than she meant. "Do I get to depend on you, or am I just a liability you didn't plan for?" His eyes flashed, pain flickering across his face. "You're not a liability. You're—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "You're everything I didn't see coming." She wanted to believe him, but the words felt hollow against the reality crashing around her. "Then why does it feel like I'm fighting this alone?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Your mom's pushing Claire Montgomery like she's your future. My boss is one step from firing me, and now some reporters digging into us. I can't keep doing this, Ethan. I can't be your secret anymore." He reached across the table, his hand covering hers, warm and steady. "You're not a secret," he said fiercely. "Not to me. I know I've screwed this up, but I'm not letting you go. We'll figure it out together." She looked at their hands, his pale skin against her brown, and felt a pang of something she couldn't name. Hope, maybe, or fear. "How?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your world doesn't want me in it." He leaned closer, his eyes locking on hers. "Then I'll change my world." Before she could respond, he stood, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. The bar faded away, the music, the lights, the city itself, as he kissed her, slow and deliberate, like he was staking a claim. Her hands found his chest, her fingers curling into his shirt, and for a moment, she let herself believe him, let herself fall into the promise of his touch. The skyline sparkled behind them, a silent witness to a vow neither of them fully understood. But the moment shattered with a buzz from her phone. She pulled back, her heart pounding, and glanced at the screen. Another email from Nadia Patel, this one with a preview of her article. Ethan Caldwell's hidden romance, inside the affair, shaking his empire. The words hit like ice water, and Ava's eyes widened as she skimmed the text. It wasn't just the photo anymore. Nadia had details, dates, locations, even a quote from Claire Montgomery saying she wasn't surprised by Ethan's choices. Ava's hand trembled as she showed him the screen. "This is out there now," she said, her voice hollow. "All of it." Ethan's face darkened, his jaw tight. Claire wouldn't. My mom must have. He stopped, shaking his head. I'll handle it. Handle it how? Ava asked, stepping back, the distance between them growing. This isn't just your board anymore, Ethan. This is my life. He didn't answer, and the silence was deafening. She turned away, the city lights blurring through tears she refused to let fall. I need to go, she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. Ava, wait. But she was already moving, weaving through the bar, the guitarist's chords chasing her into the night. She stepped onto the Dumbo streets, the air cool against her skin, and walked toward the Brooklyn Bridge, its cables glowing like a lifeline. The skyline stretched before her, beautiful and brutal, and Ava felt the weight of a choice she wasn't ready to make. She loved Ethan. God help her, she did. But love wasn't enough if it meant losing herself. She stopped halfway across the bridge, leaning against the railing, the East River dark and restless below. Her phone buzzed again, Ethan's name flashing, but she let it go to voicemail. The city hummed around her, a symphony of ambition and heartbreak, and Ava closed her eyes, searching for the strength to keep going, to find her way back to the woman she'd fought so hard to become. Ava Thompson was done waiting for the world to make sense. 10 days after Nadia Patel's article turned her life into a tabloid headline, she stood in the wreckage of everything she'd built. Her Brooklyn apartment, once a cozy retreat, felt claustrophobic, the fairy lights casting long shadows across her sketch pads and half-empty coffee mugs. Outside, New York churned, taxis honking, sirens wailing, but inside, Ava was stuck, trapped in a loop of doubt and anger that no amount of Motown records could fix. The photo that had sparked it all, that stolen moment at Mama Rosa's with Ethan Caldwell, was old news now, replaced by Nadia's exposé. Ethan Caldwell's hidden romance, inside the affair, shaking his empire. The article hadn't just named Ava, it had dissected her life, painting her as an opportunistic climber, a woman who'd seduced a billionaire to climb the social ladder. The comments online were merciless, laced with venom about her background, her skin, her ambition. She's not even that pretty, one read. Just another diversity hire, sneered another. Each word was a knife, cutting at the pride she'd spent a decade forging. But the real damage wasn't virtual. It was happening at Zenith Agency, where her career hung by a thread. After Howard Grant's recommendation of a leave of absence, Ava had walked into work each day braced for judgment. Colleagues who'd once clapped her on the back now avoided her eyes, their whispers trailing her down the halls. Worst of all was Derek Walsh, the co-worker who'd always had it out for her. He'd taken over her Caldwell account with a smirk, strutting around like he'd already claimed her corner office. Ava sat on her couch, scrolling through her phone, the screen a blur of notifications she didn't dare open. Her inbox was a war zone, clients pulling back, reporters sniffing for more dirt, even a curt note from Howard summoning her for another meeting tomorrow. She tossed the phone aside, her hands trembling. She'd fought her whole life to prove she belonged. Detroit to New York, scholarship to corner office. But now, it felt like the city was spitting her out. And then there was Ethan. Since their rooftop meeting at the hideout, he'd gone radio silent, his texts dwindling to one-word replies. Busy. Meetings. Soon. Each message was a fresh wound, a reminder of the distance growing between them. She'd believed him when he said he'd fight for her, when he'd kissed her under the Dumbo skyline like she was his future. But now, with his absence screaming louder than any headline, she wondered if she'd been a fool to trust him. Her phone buzzed, and she flinched, half expecting another barb from Nadia. Instead, it was Maya Jackson, her best friend, who'd been her anchor through this mess. You alive? Coming over with pizza, don't argue. Ava managed a faint smile, texting back a thumbs up. Maya was a godsend. 5 feet of grit and heart, always ready to call Ava out or cheer her on, depending on what she needed most. When Maya arrived, the smell of pepperoni filled the apartment, a small rebellion against the chaos. She kicked off her sneakers, her braids swinging as she plopped onto the couch. "All right, Thompson," she said, slicing the pizza with a plastic knife. "You're looking rough. What's the latest?" Ava grabbed a slice, picking at the cheese. "Same old. Internet hates me, work's a nightmare, and Ethan's ghosting me like I'm some Tinder fling." Maya's eyes narrowed. Her slice paused midair. "Ghosting? Mr. Billionaire? That's a new low, even for him." "He's not." Ava stopped, sighing. "I don't know what he is anymore. He said he'd handle it, but all I get is radio silence. Meanwhile, Howard's acting like I'm a walking PR disaster." Maya leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Let's talk about Howard. What's he pulling now?" Ava recounted yesterday's meeting, the memory sour. She'd walked into Howard's office, her blazer pressed, her chin high, determined to fight. But Howard hadn't even offered her a chair, just gestured to the article printout on his desk, Claire Montgomery's quote, circled in red. "I'm not surprised by Ethan's choices. He's always been adventurous." The jab was subtle but brutal, and Howard had leaned into it. "Our clients expect professionalism," he'd said, his tone clipped. "This suggests favoritism, Ava. The Caldwell account's already been reassigned, and I'm afraid we're suspending you, effective immediately. Paid, of course, until we sort this out." "Suspended?" Ava had echoed, her voice tight. "For what? Doing my job? Because I've delivered on every campaign." "It's not about delivery," he'd cut in, his eyes cold. "It's about trust. Clients are questioning your judgment. We can't afford that." She'd left his office shaking, her pride battered. Suspended wasn't fired, but it was close. A public slap that said she'd crossed a line she hadn't even drawn. "Derek's behind this," Ava told Maya now, her voice low. "I know it. He's been feeding Nadia dirt, probably since the gala. I caught him smirking in the break room today, like he's already measuring my office for curtains." Maya's jaw tightened. "That slimy bastard. You got proof?" "Nothing solid," Ava admitted, frustration bubbling. "Just a gut feeling and the fact that he's been gunning for me forever. But Howard's eating it up. Derek's his golden boy now." Maya set her pizza down, her eyes fierce. "Then get proof. Dig into his emails, his calls, whatever. If Derek's playing dirty, you can't just sit here taking hits." "I'm suspended, Maya," Ava snapped, her voice rising. "I can't exactly waltz into the server room and play hacker. And even if I could, what's the point? The damage is done." "The point," Maya said, leaning closer, "is you don't go down without a fight. You're Ava Thompson, the woman who turned a coffee spill into a job offer. You don't let Derek or Ethan or anybody decide your story." Ava's throat burned, Maya's words hitting too close to home. She wanted to fight, wanted to storm Zenith and demand her place. But the weight of it all, the headlines, the suspension, Ethan's silence, was crushing her. She stood, pacing to the window, Brooklyn's lights flickering like a taunt. "I'm tired, Maya," she said quietly. "Tired of proving myself, tired of hiding. I don't know if I've got it in me anymore." Maya was quiet for a moment, then stood, crossing to her. "You do," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You always have. But you gotta figure out what you're fighting for. Your job, yourself, or him." Ava didn't answer, her reflection staring back from the glass, a woman caught between worlds. She didn't know anymore. Not about Ethan, not about anything. That night, against her better judgment, Ava went to Ethan's Greenwich Village loft. She needed answers, closure. something to stop the ache in her chest. The streets were slick with rain, the city's pulse muted as she buzzed his door. He answered in a heartbeat, his hair disheveled, his eyes shadowed like he hadn't slept in days. "Ava," he said, stepping aside, his voice rough. "I didn't think you'd—" "Come?" she finished, brushing past him. The loft was the same, turntable silent, wine bottles cluttering the counter, but it felt colder, like the warmth they'd shared had drained away. "Yeah, well, I needed to see you, not your texts. You." He shut the door, leaning against it. "I'm sorry," he said, and for once, he sounded like he meant it. "The board's losing it. Stock's down 10 points, investors are screaming, and they're pushing me to step back as CEO. Temporarily, they say." Ava's stomach dropped. "Step back? Because of me?" "Not you," he said quickly, crossing to her. "Because of the noise. They think it's a distraction, that I'm compromised. My mom's on the warpath saying I'm throwing away everything my dad built." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "Compromised. Funny, that's what Howard called me. Suspended me too, in case you didn't hear. So yeah, Ethan, I'd say we're both pretty damn compromised." His face fell, guilt flashing in his eyes. "I didn't know," he said, reaching for her hand. "Ava, I'm trying to fix this." "Stop," she said, pulling back, her voice trembling. "You keep saying that, but you're not fixing anything. You're hiding, same as always, letting your board, your mom, everyone else call the shots. And I'm out here taking the hits, my job, my name, everything I've worked for." "That's not fair," he shot back, his voice rising. "You think I want this? I've got responsibilities, people counting on me, and I don't?" she shouted, her hands balling into fists. "I've got no safety net, Ethan, no trust fund, no fancy last name to fall back on. I lose my job, I'm done. You lose yours, you're still a billionaire." He flinched, her words landing like blows. For a moment they stood there, the rain drumming against the windows, the silence between them heavier than ever. Then, something in Ethan snapped. He closed the distance, his hands cupping her face, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and need. "You think I don't care?" he said, his voice low, raw. "You think I'm not fighting for you every damn day?" "Then show me," she cried, tears spilling over. "Because all I see is you pulling away, leaving me to deal with this alone." He kissed her, hard and desperate, cutting off her words. It wasn't gentle, not like their rooftop kiss. This was a collision, all the pain and longing they'd buried pouring out. Her hands gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, her body betraying her even as her heart screamed to stop. His fingers dug into her hips, her back hitting the wall, and for a moment, she let herself drown in him, in the heat of his mouth, the scrape of his stubble against her skin. It was everything she wanted and everything she couldn't have, a fleeting escape from the truth. But then she pushed him away, gasping, her hands shaking. "No," she said, wiping her eyes. "This doesn't fix it. It doesn't change anything." Ethan stared at her, his chest heaving, his face a map of regret. "Ava, I can't do this," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't keep pretending you're mine when you're not. Your world, your rules, they don't bend for me." He stepped toward her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "You said you'd change things," she whispered, "but you're still playing their game. And I'm done being a pawn." She grabbed her coat, her vision blurring as she headed for the door. "When you figure out what you're willing to lose for me," she said, turning back one last time, "you know where to find me." The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing in the empty hallway. She stumbled into the rain, the village streets slick and unforgiving, her sneakers splashing through puddles. The city loomed around her, its lights cold and distant, and Ava felt like she was falling, with no one to catch her. The next morning, Ava was barely out of bed when her phone rang. She froze, expecting Ethan, but the caller ID showed an unknown number. She answered, her voice wary. "Hello? Ava Thompson?" The voice was smooth, cultured, unmistakable. Lillian Caldwell, Ethan's mother. "I'd like to meet. Today, if possible. I believe we have matters to discuss." Ava's blood ran cold, her grip tightening on the phone. Lillian's tone wasn't a request, it was a summons. "What kind of matters?" she asked, already dreading the answer. "Personal ones," Lillian said, her voice like silk over steel. "Regarding my son and your future." Ava's heart pounded, the weight of Lillian's words settling like a stone. She thought of Ethan's face, his kiss, the promises he hadn't kept. And now his mother, the gatekeeper of his world, was stepping in. Ava didn't know what Lillian wanted, but she knew one thing. This wasn't a courtesy call. She hung up, staring at the city through her window, its skyline sharp against the gray dawn. She'd come to New York to conquer it, to claim her place. But now, standing on the edge of losing everything, she wondered if the city had already won. Ava Thompson had never been good at waiting, but the past week had been a masterclass in it. 7 days since she'd walked out of Ethan Caldwell's loft. 7 days since Lillian Caldwell's chilling phone call. 7 days of silence that felt like a lifetime. Her Brooklyn apartment was a fortress of solitude now, its fairy lights dimmed by the weight of unanswered questions. She'd turned off her phone notifications, tired of the tabloid buzz, tired of hoping for Ethan's name to flash on her screen. New York pulsed outside, bodegas glowing, subway trains rattling. But Ava was stuck, caught between the life she'd built and the love she'd lost. She sat on her couch, a sketch pad open in her lap, pencil hovering over a blank page. She'd always found answers in her work, turning chaos into campaigns that sold dreams. But now, her mind was empty, her heart heavier than ever. Lillian's voice echoed in her memory. "Personal matters, regarding my son, and your future." Ava hadn't met her yet. She'd dodged the invitation, unsure if she could face Ethan's mother without crumbling. But the call lingered like a storm cloud, a reminder that her choices weren't just hers anymore. The city was quiet tonight, the usual clamor softened by a late spring breeze. Ava stood, crossing to her window, Brooklyn's patchwork of rooftops stretching below. She'd come to this city to prove herself, to turn a girl from Detroit into a name that mattered. But loving Ethan had rewritten her story, and now she wasn't sure who she was without him, or if she wanted to find out. A knock at her door jolted her, sharp and unexpected. She froze, her pulse spiking. It was past midnight. Maya would have texted first, and no one else knew she was hiding out. She crossed to the door, peering through the peephole, and her breath caught. Ethan stood there, his hair mussed, his jacket rumpled, looking less like a billionaire and more like a man who'd run out of places to hide. She opened the door, her heart in her throat. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos inside. "What are you doing here?" He didn't move, his eyes searching hers, raw and unguarded. "You didn't answer my calls," he said simply, his voice low, rough. "I couldn't wait anymore." "You didn't say anything worth answering," she shot back. But her resolve wavered as she stepped aside, letting him in. The apartment felt smaller with him in it, his presence filling the space like a song she couldn't forget. He stood by her couch, hands stuffed in his pockets, like he was afraid to touch anything. "I had a meeting with the board yesterday," he started, his gaze fixed on the floor. 5 hours, nonstop. "They wanted a statement, something to calm the investors, to make this—" He gestured vaguely, meaning them, the scandal, everything, Go away. Ava's stomach twisted, but she kept her face neutral, crossing her arms. And what did you tell them? He looked up, his eyes locking on hers, and she saw something new there. Resolve, maybe, or defiance. I told them I'm not distancing myself from you, he said, his voice steady. I told them you're not a fling, not a PR problem, not some mistake I need to fix. I told them you're the woman I love. Her heart stuttered, the words hitting like a wave. She wanted to believe him, wanted to run to him, but the pain of the past week held her back. And how'd that go? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He gave a mirthless laugh, rubbing his neck. 2 of them threatened to quit. My mom called me reckless, said I was throwing away my dad's legacy. Stock's down another 3 points. It's a mess. I'm sorry, she said, meaning it despite herself. She knew what his company meant to him, the weight of carrying his family's name. Don't be, he said, stepping closer, his eyes fierce. Because for the first time in years, I made a choice that wasn't about numbers or optics. I chose what I want, Ava, not what they expect. She swallowed, her throat tight. And what's that? You, he said, his voice breaking. Us. He crossed the room in 2 strides, kneeling in front of her chair, his hands finding hers. His touch was warm, grounding, and she felt her walls crumbling piece by piece. I've spent my life in rooms where everyone looks the same, thinks the same, wants the same, he said, his thumbs brushing her knuckles. Success was a checklist. Money, power, control. Then you walked in, with your ideas and your laugh and the way you don't give a damn about my last name, and I realized I've been chasing the wrong things. Ava's eyes stung, but she managed a small smile. You were pretty impressed by my jazz taste, though. He laughed, the sound soft, real. Yeah, that too. His face grew serious again, his grip tightening. I'm not saying it'll be easy. People will talk, my mom, the press, the board. Some doors might close for both of us. But I'm done hiding, Ava. No more secret dates, no more dodging cameras. I want this, us, out in the open. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the man she'd fallen for. Not the CEO, not the headline, just Ethan, flawed and fighting. But doubt lingered, sharp as a blade. Are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling. Because I've already lost so much. I can't lose myself too. You won't, he said, his voice fierce. I can't promise the world will change overnight, but I promise you won't face it alone. And neither will I. She nodded, tears spilling over, and he pulled her into his arms, his lips brushing her forehead. The city hummed outside, its lights softer now, like a promise of something new. They weren't naive. They knew the road ahead would be rough, knew the whispers and stares wouldn't stop. But in that moment, with his heartbeat against hers, Ava felt something shift, a certainty that they'd chosen each other, no matter what came next. 2 weeks later, they stood together at a community center in Harlem, the air buzzing with laughter and paint fumes. The event was small, a fundraiser for an arts program Ava had dreamed up years ago, inspired by the kids in Detroit who'd never had a chance to hold a brush. Ethan had made it real, funneling his foundation's money into the project, his first step away from the corporate grind. The room was alive, kids splashing colors on canvases, parents snapping photos, volunteers handing out juice boxes. Ava wore a simple sweater and jeans, her curls loose, her smile brighter than it had been in months. Ethan was beside her, in a flannel shirt and sneakers, looking like he belonged here, not in a boardroom. They'd gone public the day after that night in her apartment, not with a press release, but with a quiet post on Ethan's personal Instagram. A photo of them at the Blue Note Lounge, his arm around her, captioned simply, "Worth it." The internet had exploded, of course. Some cheered, some sneered, but Ava didn't care. She'd stood at the mic today, sharing her story with the kids, telling them how art had saved her when nothing else could. Ethan had held her hand, his presence steady, and for the first time, she felt seen. Not as a headline, but as herself. They weren't perfect. Lillian still called Ava Ethan's friend in icy tones, and Zenith hadn't called her back from suspension. But Ava had other plans. She'd started sketching ideas for her own agency, fueled by the clients who'd followed her, drawn to her fire. Ethan had stepped back from Caldwell Enterprises, passing the CEO baton to focus on the foundation. He said it was the first time he'd felt free, and when he smiled at her across the room, she believed him. Later, they slipped outside, the Harlem streets alive with dusk, food carts steaming, kids biking past, music spilling from open windows. They walked hand in hand, no cameras, no pretense, just them. "You good?" Ethan asked, squeezing her fingers. "Better than good," she said, leaning into him. "You?" He grinned, the skyline reflected in his eyes. "Never better." 2 years later, Ava stood in her own office, a loft in Bed-Stuy with exposed brick and a view of the city she'd conquered. Her agency, Thompson Creative, was small but growing, built on campaigns that told real stories, not just sold products. Ethan ran their foundation from a shared space down the hall, funding arts programs in neighborhoods like the one she'd grown up in. They'd faced their share of storms. Articles still popped up, dissecting their relationship, and Lillian's approval was a glacier, thawing at its own pace. But they'd learned to weather it, choosing each other through the messy, complicated parts. Tonight, they were on her apartment's rooftop, the same one she'd stood on during the worst of it, the city sprawling below like a sea of stars. Ethan pulled her close, his arms warm against the spring chill. "Still worth it?" he asked, his voice teasing but soft. She laughed, tilting her head to meet his eyes. "Every second." They kissed, slow and sure, the skyline watching like an old friend. Ava thought of the girl she'd been, scared, scrappy, fighting for a place, and the woman she'd become, not because of Ethan, but because she'd chosen herself too. Love wasn't a fairy tale. It was a promise, renewed every day, through the noise and the quiet. She turned to the city, its lights a testament to every battle she'd won. "This is ours," she said, her voice steady. "All of it." Ethan nodded, his hand in hers. "Ours." This wasn't the end. Not really. Ava and Ethan's story was still unfolding, a tapestry of choices and chances. But if there's one thing I've learned from them, it's that love doesn't thrive in shadows. It grows in the light, where you're brave enough to be seen, flaws and all. If you're hiding who you are, afraid of what it might cost to step out, take it from Ava. The view's worth the climb. So hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. What did Ava and Ethan's journey spark in you? Have you ever had to fight for something that felt impossible? Share your story below, because we're all in this city of dreams together, chasing our own lights.